r/asks Reddit X inmates of Reddit, what was the stupidest thing you've seen a new inmate do on his first day in? Told your kid there was a pool out of yard guard. Saw him waiting to go out in shorts with his shower towel and asked him what he was doing. The kid said, I'm going to go swimming outside. It looks nice. Don't think I've laughed so hard in my life. It's an original but always funny. This one is strangely wholesome. It's just Fanny light hazing. Worked as a corrections officer guy, got busted for sexual asshole of a minor, figured everyone else in the tank who was on similar charges, so began talking openly about it. Feeling he was safe. We had to subdue 5 guys who jumped him, and the rec yard guy was sent to the hospital as he was fairly unresponsive. He was sent to protective custody after that. The kid came in, and I assume he has watched a lot of movies because he figured he'd fight the biggest guy on the range. LOL, he wasn't even the toughest guy in the hospital. He woke up in obligatory, not me. But I know a guy, and his cellmate was a young 19-year-old kid. The kid was confused, and in the course of talking about their lives, admitted he was the guy I know told him, "Hey, man, that's cool, but don't tell that to anyone else in here." Seriously, I saw the show with a gay prisoner, Annette. He wanted to be in solitary. Somebody tried to rape him, so he grabbed their balls and squeezed hard Ben with the balls still in hand. He twisted them and flipped himself over the city, walked right into a Mexican gang leading, and almost got beaten by Mab Source and the idiot edit. I was in jail, not prison. My mistake again, idiot. Second edit. Since many people are asking, from what I understand, the difference between prison and jail is this: jail is for sentences of less than a year, whereas prison is for sentences of over a year, varying from state to state. Jails are run by the city or county, prisons run by the state or federal government. You can go to jail to await your trial before sentencing. Then, after being sent back to jail or prison, depending on how long and whether it's a felony or not, prison is for felonies. Tell everyone how he was going to escape and showed off all the tools he was using. Was he stopped by the other inmates or by guards? Not shower for weeks. He got his clothes ripped up and he was thrown half naked into the showers. They also tuned him up pretty well. Did anyone know why he refused to shower? Like, was he just gross, or was he afraid soap would be dropped? Not an ex-inmate, but an ex-company dude came in on drug charges. The first thing he does upon walking into the pod is announced loudly enough that I could hear that he got drugs past the dipshits and intake, yet not the brightest bulb. That one, LOL, was he telling the truth or just bluffing the truth? They were in his ass. They didn't catch it on the bend, and the coughing kid gets spooked in, hit the unit, and start borrowing food and other commissary items before he knew it. He was $200 in the whole. Problem in jail and prison: most people who are willing to loan items out expect 2 or 3 of the same item back. Interest. Very easy way to get yourself indebted is by borrowing any food or other items and never getting in debt while incarcerated. The skinny kid hippie type got busted with some weed. Someone else in the range was getting beat up for something or other, and the kid tried to intervene. Just said, "Hey, leave him alone." God beats to within an inch of his life in the shower. Pro tip in jail: mind your own business. Call his grandma and just cast her out and talk her like dog shit because she didn't want to put her house up for collateral to bail him out. Anybody do anything to teach him manners would just mind their business. A slight twist. We had a pink wet floor sign that we would put up at the entrance to the showers so everyone knew there was someone in there jerking off. The fun game was to watch the new guys, myself included, innocently walk into the entrance to the showers that very first time past the pink wet floor sign and then see him come scattering back out a few moments later. Was there ever a time when the guy didn't walk out? "Excuse me, sir. There seems to be a mistake. I'm supposed to be getting out of prison today." "You're in the wrong line, dumbass. Reach across someone's food. Is this a matter of courtesy, or do people have to assume you're going to duck with their food if you reach over it?" Scoopy looking a kid. Curly hair, and thick glasses. He comes in and for some reason, he befriends me. He starts telling me what he did sexually assault a minor. I told him not to be telling nobody that shit because it'll get him in trouble the rest of that day. The next I bailed out. By then I could hear him from across the hall telling other people not surprised if he's been kicked around a few times. LOL, I read this wearing my curly hair and thick glasses. Thankfully I am not goofy looking though, so it doesn't apply to me. When the skinny little streets thug white kid walked across the yard and threw a mayonnaise, a bench full of full-blown creeps didn't see him much after that shit storm. Admit that he was influential assault and being a pedo, and then it was about 8 p.m. and we found out he was a chronic masturbator and he would not stop jacking off in his bank. He was 22 and it was jail, not prison. So at that moment, we had maybe 12 or 15 people in our cell. Some guy woke up from a nap and thought he was having a seizure, so he went to go check on him. What a goddamn shock. They both had added spelling and grammar. My father-in-law did 12 years on a second-degree murder rap back in the very early 90s. He told me that one time this new guy plopped himself down at the Hells Angels table and started eating breakfast. When he was told to move, he ignored them. After breakfast the CEO ended up having to cut through about 6 rolls of duct tape to get the gallows. He never sat near the H again. Not me, but my dad guy came in bridging at what he did and said he was a monster and the toughest guy around, and that he could take anybody on in the pen, giving him the benefit of the doubt. He was a peak big and tough guy. Come to find out, though he was in for the assault, rape, then murder of a woman and her child, he might have been big and tough, but not after 5 big guys beat the absolute shit out of him and practically killed him. As most of you know, the one thing old prisoners can agree on is that anyone who messes with kids or women are on an immediate hit list. Edit, the women thing might have just been a rule amongst him and the PPL he ran with. And POP, I hope you have a good first day of prison tomorrow. Got busted for smoking weed with 2 buddies when we were put in the holding cell. One of them wanted to mark the event by carving his name in the paint on the cell door. When we got put in a cell later, they came back and took him to solitary for a week. So my dad's currently convicted. The craziest story he's told me is one of the newer inmates was young and arrogant, always spouting off bullshit about how unaccountable he was. Then one day another inmate packed up his items and went into the younger inmate's cell and tried to strangle him. The younger inmate was that ducking, annoying he survived the attempted murderers in Max, and when the younger inmate came back from the hospital he was stopped. I learned a little spouse and bullshit. Packing his stuff up in advance is really what makes this story. Where I was in prison, they utilized 40mm of soft round launches to respond to group disturbances. Let me tell you, they weren't soft. The kid comes in thinking he is still hardcore frothy juvenile hall because guards there didn't do anything when people thought, decided to nap and join a gang that he knew nothing about on his first day, thought he was tough and started to a disc of the gangway, had high tensions with at the time and started a group disturbance. COs respond. Tell him to get down, he refuses and curses at them. Boom, 40mm to his face was an accidental shot to the face. According to the CO, the face was distorted with her after a fractured skull on his first day. A lot of Judy badges get to come to Jesus moment when they get to big boy jail. Saw this weird, unshaven, scraggly young guy with a yellow beanie once who said he agreed with the Latin kings on social issues. But fiscally he was more of an area and he ended up joining both gangs. One guy bragging about what he did to get himself in jail, and the other dude showering barefoot. Great way to get convicted, great way to get jungle funds. This weird guy named Robert from the TV show 60 Days has a couple of stories that could be in this thread. The stupidest may have been when he covered the prison camera with a sheet and went to solitary for 30 days. He quit the program halfway. He's the dude that said, "This is like a vacation for me," when he was in solitary, and punched the biggest guy on the block to establish dominance. How did that go down afterward? I'm going to take a shot in the dark and say badly. There was an old myth that if you challenged the meanest guy in your block to a fight, everyone else would leave you alone. It's true. No one will torment you if you are dead. The kid tried it and got dropped off the 5th tier first day in Gen Pop, last day in Gen Pop. Most guys just want to do their time alone. Most rape and violence in prison are about debt or tax. If you play it straight, 98% of guys will just leave you alone. Ducking someone up in the yard makes your time worse, not better. Lots of privilege of time in solitary. Most people don't want that. Most of the straight-up psychopaths are in 23 strokes. One lockdown anyway, you get in debt or shoot your mouth off and you will get settled or taxed. Both are to be avoided. Heat the candy bar found on his pillow is that bad. The newer guy did some time and apparently, this is a real and serious thing. Suffice it to say nothing's free in prison. There was a new guy who came in one day. You could tell he was gay by his mannerisms. A few days into his sentence he was forced to suck a guy's dog. He bit it off. I was not ready for that to waste. Just going to generalize small-town folk who are used to being the biggest and buriest big fish, small pond types who think they are going to be kink when they walk in. They usually are dominated, pretty quickly dominated, being either beat or made into beach best bet if you go to prison. Hopefully, no one ever goes as unless you know someone well connected on the inside. Just keep your head down, focus on yourself and do your time. It's going to be boring, menial, and seemingly endless, but you don't want to get caught up in any gang stuff. Will be snatching. There's a code and system in prison that needs to be followed. And if you walk in like king shit off Turtle Hill, when you are a nobody, you will learn real quick that you ain't nothing. Saw it in one of those jail documentaries. A young man about 18 who had no gang affiliation of any kind, it was in for some kind of minor crime, decides to try to impress the Nazi people by lifting weights with them. He tries to do leg presses, turns out he couldn't even lift 100 pounds and barely got any reps done. The whole Nazi gang laughed at him while he was doing it. Edit, someone linked the clip. They laugh at him from not left in 240 pounds, not a 100. I found a hypodermic needle in my thin mattress and tried to go give it to the guard. I was bum-rushed by an inmate whose it probably was and told that if I had given it to the guard, I would have faced a Pete Eston solitary. This was day 1. On day 3, I asked to trade laundry detergent for a back rob, and only after I did so did I realize that everyone thought I was gay. I was a very dumb 18-year-old white girl. Start a fight that she couldn't finish. This may not have been his first day, but I will never forget this. While I was in the intake tank, which is the first tank or section you go into after being processed in the county, this young kid comes into the county and keeps complaining that he doesn't get his cannabinol and other marijuana-related prescriptions in jail. He was arrogant and constantly pissed everyone off during count 1 day as we were all in our banks. He starts complaining again and then says to the guard, "What if we all write immediately?" Like 10 other guys yell very loudly. We don't know or agree with him. The guard then says, "What the duck did you say?" The kid then continues about rioting and that he has rights. Everyone in the tank ducking stays frozen in their bunk, trying their best to be non-threatening and also show they have no interest in what is more on his name. So the guard picks him up by his throat and slams him into the wall after scaring the kid shitless. He explains he has a new charge for inciting a riot. Kid gets held off to solitary, never saw him again, but I heard he spent the rest of his 30, 60, 90, whatever amount of days in solitary. Insane to me that he'd say that in a Ducking County jail. Not wearing shoes in the shower is gross. That's where everyone jack off and comes all over the floor, not to mention WE disease. They've got not going to lie. My first thought wasn't that, but foot fungus. The guy thought the hard part was for everyone and went to medical with his jaw broken for talking shit when he got called out. I got bunk restriction while I was in jail on one of my first nights. Twice a day they did roll the call where we all had to sit on our bunk and be quiet while the officer came from bunk to bunk and checked all of our wristbands and made sure we were all who we are halfway through. He was doing this. Someone rips the loudest, fattest, longest wet fight I've ever heard in my life, me having the mind block a 5-year-old burst into laughter. I've never heard a thought like this in my life. Just keep your head down, focus on yourself, and do your time. It's going to be boring, menial, and seemingly endless, but you don't want to get caught up in any gang stuff we'll be snatching. There's a code and system in prison that needs to be followed. And if you walk in like king shit off Turtle Hill, when you are a nobody, you will learn real quick that you ain't nothing. Saw it in one of those jail documentaries. A young man about 18 who had no gang affiliation of any kind, it was in for some kind of minor crime, decides to try to impress the Nazi people by lifting weights with them. He tries to do leg presses, turns out he couldn't even lift 100 pounds and barely got any reps done. The whole Nazi gang laughed at him while he was doing it. Edit, someone linked the clip. They laugh at him from not lifting 240 pounds, not a 100. I found a hypodermic needle in my thin mattress and tried to go give it to the guard. I was bum-rushed by an inmate whose it probably was, and told that if I had given it to the guard, I would have faced a Pete Eston solitary. This was day 1. On day 3, I asked to trade laundry detergent for a back rob, and only after I did so did I realize that everyone thought I was gay. I was a very dumb 18-year-old white girl. Start a fight that she couldn't finish. This may not have been his first day, but I will never forget this while I was in the intake tank, which is the first tank or section you go into after being processed in the county. This young kid comes into the county and keeps complaining that he doesn't get his cannabinol and other marijuana-related prescriptions in jail. He was arrogant and constantly pissed everyone off during count 1 day as we were all in our banks. He starts complaining again and then says to the guard, "What if we all write immediately?" Like 10 other guys yell very loudly. We don't know or agree with him. The guard then says, "What the duck did you say?" The kid then continues about rioting and that he has rights. Everyone in the tank ducking stays frozen in their bunk, trying their best to be non-threatening and also show they have no interest in what is more on his name. So the guard picks him up by his throat and slams him into the wall after scaring the kid shitless. He explains he has a new charge for inciting a riot. Kid gets held off to solitary, never saw him again, but I heard he spent the rest of his 30, 60, 90, whatever amount of days in solitary. Insane to me that he'd say that in a Ducking County jail. Not wearing shoes in the shower is gross. That's where everyone jack off and comes all over the floor, not to mention WE disease. They've got not going to lie. My first thought wasn't that, but foot fungus. The guy thought the hard part was for everyone and went to medical with his jaw broken for talking shit when he got called out. I got bunk restriction while I was in jail on one of my first nights. Twice a day they did roll the call where we all had to sit on our bunk and be quiet while the officer came from bunk to bunk and checked all of our wristbands and made sure we were all who we are halfway through. He was doing this. Someone rips the loudest, fattest, longest wet fight I've ever heard in my life, me having the mind block a 5-year-old burst into laughter. I've never heard a thought like this in my life. A few other guys laugh, but even thinking of it now, I giggle about it anyways. The officer is like, "All right, settle down," but I can't stop laughing about it. He tells me to calm down, but I tell him through my tears of laughter. I literally cannot help it. I really couldn't. It was the funniest thing that happened in a few days. I wasn't there anyway. He gets pissed. I try to explain. I am not trying to be rude and disobey him through my laughter, but he isn't having it. Luckily, he just gave me a bank restriction and punish everyone that I could see on the TV from my bunk, so I just hung out the rest of the night too long and didn't weed. I couldn't stop laughing at the biggest fat I ever heard in my life and got grounded to my bunk for a night edit obligatory while my top comment is about fat smack would be. Went in when I was a young idiot. It was all bunk beds, no cells. Just the room with beds and a side room with the TV. It was a unit for older people working the same job. The new guide comes in little white, bowed, quiet, and kept to himself until one night out of nowhere he starts sprinting around the room singing at the top of his lungs in the tune of Black Sabbath and Man. but changed the lyrics to find the N-word man running through the hood from the Ku Klux Klan. Everyone was just kind of frozen for about 15 seconds. Seriously confused, then someone tripped him, and then it was just mayhem until the CO could get enough help to disperse the crowd. I remember being surprised he survived. Everyone in the unit had steel-toe boots for the job we did, holding them and hitting him and with them instead of wearing and kicking. The scene off towards where all the guys are trying to figure out whose boots are hose and comparing who's had the most blood was freaking surreal. Here's one from a good friend of mine. We'll call Empty, who spent half his life inside, picked a fight with the local inmates over something minor to establish dominance. The guy was European and Europeans were kept separate from locals with good reason. There would be full-scale gang wars between the two sides now and again within the prison. None of his fellow Europeans backed him up. Hell, some of them even jumped in on kicking the ever-loving shit out of the newbie. He doesn't think the guy made it. My family attorney told me about one of his clients who was sentenced to 2 years for a federal case. Non-violent. Someone gave him really bad advice about how to survive in federal prison. He followed the advice and found a big, tough-looking guy. On the very first day he beat him up severely. The victim turned out to be a tough-looking guy who was a gentle giant who didn't fight back much. I ended up with 2 broken legs and a fractured rib. My attorney's client got 4 extra years added to his 2-year sentence. That's what I call steel paste. This was about 15 years ago. Not an ex-inmate, but my mom's friend is a retired prison guard for a max security prison. He'd been there for a long time and a lot of the inmates liked and respected him. There were a few instances when new inmates would try to be difficult or attack him to impress the elder inmates. The newbies would get beat up pretty well and wouldn't cause trouble for him anymore. Don't mess with, well, like. A guy came and got on the top bunk within 10 minutes. The dude rolled off it and smacked his head on the concrete and started to have a seizure. Guard eventually came and just video taped him for a while in the middle of the room. Eventually, they walked him out when he stopped, but then he ran into the wall and fell, then started to seize her again. They just kept filling. Nobody thought he was having seizures. But he hit his head pretty badly. So they took him to the infirmary. I pretty much just hear younger guys trying to impress. Odds are if you are real G, then you can tell who's home. The ones who get caught lying are the ones who have the hardest time because the trust level is low, to begin with, including Lyson. Yeah, I'd say this is mostly for Jades, but county jails and prisons have the same problem, I am sure. Asked a friend of mine who I was in rehabilitation, and he said, a dumb young guy comes in and borrows money, not able to pay it back. The sound of him being raped was horrible. Saw this fat white kid who became Muslim and then moved into a formula cell with 3 black guys in Waller. The next day, the CEOs were photographing the blood-soaked mattress out on the tier for all of us to. So there's actually about me. My first day inside, I sat down at a table in my block. Some guy came over and said it was his seat. Me being young and dumb thought I'm not going to get pumped on my first day, so I told him it was my seat. Now he walked away and came back with 3 other guys, and they beat me pretty bad. Believe it or not, I was the one who got the mark for it too. God wrote it down as I initiated the fight, and spent some time in the hole for it too. Pro, you made it to the end. You're a ducking beast. I'll cast you a deal. Smash like and subscribe for the more curated content. Drug. It's free and that's a great price.